Hello and welcome to CANNAMAntv. My name is Connor McLeod. In this interview, I speak with chiropractor and owner of Doc's Oils, Dr Jason Talley. In this interview, we discuss Dr Talley's history as a chiropractor and what led him to engage with cannabis, the stigma surrounding cannabis as a holistic medicine, the harms caused by overprescribed pharmaceuticals, mental health and the importance of speaking out, Doc's Oils and the difference between CBD and CBG, and what Dr Talley hopes to achieve in the future with Doc's Oils. Make sure and like and subscribe, and join me on Patreon, where you could help to build a stronger cannabis media platform. Now then, let's talk cannabis. So, essentially, we'll just dive straight in then. You're just talking about your experience in chiropractic and stuff like that. Could you detail your experience and what it was that actually led you to engage with cannabis?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, from a chiropractic standpoint, like I said, I've been a chiropractor for now about 20 years. I've practiced in my hometown where I grew up. But I've had a practice where I see primarily all kinds of pain, whether it be neck pain, back pain, extremity pain, you name it. We see a little bit of everything. I specialized in athletes for quite a while. I was an athlete myself growing up. I'd had some injuries and had success with chiropractic. And so, and then I got into watching and following a lot of MMA fighting and things like that. So I got involved with a MMA group and was kind of the team chiropractor for the MMA. So I've done a lot of work with sports. I've done a lot of work with all kinds of patients and things. But from the standpoint of cannabis, for myself, it started truly as a recreational thing. I started probably using cannabis myself about 20 years ago. Now, as I used, it wasn't so much for medicine, but I will say that I did get the same benefits in a lot of ways. Yeah. But fast forward to today, how I got involved with CBD specifically was I was, like I said, a big believer in the cannabis plant and a big believer in THC in and of itself. Hadn't seen a lot of the medical benefits of the CBD and hadn't really been around it too much. And then I had an opportunity where one of my friends, one of his people that he did business with basically was starting up a CBD business, had owned a farm, and they were switching it over to a farm to table or seed to table type of CBD cannabis. I was kind of hooked up with them. We ended up partnering up. And since me having the background with cannabis from the THC side, I saw the benefits from the psychoactivity. But when I really got involved and started doing some research with the CBD, I saw all the benefits with regards to the endocannabinoid system, but also from an inflammatory standpoint. I think CBD is the real key to the inflammation. I also think that the CBG has a key as well. But I think that the CBD is really found to be beneficial in decreasing inflammation, and then has been really great for my practice, because what I see in my practice is, like I said, pain. But my belief is that probably 90 to 95% of the pain things that come in my office are all caused by inflammation of some sort. Right. That's what happens. And so what I found is using the CBD specifically for pain mechanisms and for your arthritis, for your tendonitis, for your bursitis and things like that, have been super successful. So that's where I'm at. And then I just really do believe in the plant as a whole. I believe in THC. I believe in CBD. I believe in CBG and all the cannabinoids. But I think they need to be further researched. And I think that they need to be medically controlled of sorts. I do believe in recreational use as well. But primarily, I think it's from an access standpoint that everybody needs it. And then with access, what I think you can really do is improve the research. Once there's more access, you can improve research and really say, hey, this molecule does this molecule does that. And we have we've got true science here. And as the science continues to come along, I think that we're going to really find that then that stigma goes away. And that's what I'm really here for, is I'm trying to change that stigma. There aren't many chiropractors particularly that believe in cannabis the way that I do, and especially probably don't use it the way that I do. But I do believe in it as a medicine. I believe that I'm having great success with it. And then on a flip side, as a patient, from my standpoint, I have great luck with it. I use it for pain. I use CBD for pain. I use THC as well for pain because I'm a medical cannabis patient here in the US. So that's kind of my story in a short. I'll stop talking now and let you talk.
Not at all, not at all. I'm actually, the less I talk, the better, Jason, really, honestly. But I fully agree. One of the things in the UK that we're kind of pushing towards, I was speaking with Professor James Mills the other day, and he mentioned that even 15, 20 years ago, the access for cannabis for research purposes was almost negligible. It was minimal, to say the least, because of obviously the prohibited legislation that stopped everybody from accessing it. So you've got professionals who are looking to research in a professional capacity, but because of these really inhibiting laws, they couldn't even access it, which has inevitably slowed down the information. And we're only now beginning to access this information slowly, but slowly. And I think CBD in the UK particularly has had a tremendous push to normalising people's opinion of cannabis because it's been readily available in Holland and Barrett and high street shops, really. So I mean, have you seen a lot of reduction? What was the previous, apart from obviously physical alignment and these kind of therapeutic practices you do, was there pharmaceutical intervention that you would give to your patients to remove pain, and then they would then supplement with CBD, which is reduced pharmaceutical intervention?
So primarily being a chiropractor, I can't prescribe pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So my treatment protocols are based upon physical therapy modalities, stretching, strengthening, and then holistic medicine and plant medicine in general. So from that standpoint, chiropractic is a great, it's a great synergistic type of thing.
Yeah.
But what I've seen is I see all these patients that come in and they're already on all these medications. They're on your pain medications. They're on your Advil, your Tylenol, your aspirin, your opioids and things of that nature. And they're looking for help because they've run out of options. They're not getting the results they want. And then they're also usually getting side effects and things from these other pharmaceuticals. So with the CBD specifically, because I am a medical cannabis patient and use THC, but I cannot recommend it. In my office, in my practice, I specifically use CBD, CBG, and then we're allowed the 0.3% due to the hemp law.
Yeah.
But what I've found is as people start the CBD, and I'm giving real specific protocols with certain maladies or certain diagnoses, what I'm seeing is, number one, significant diminution of pain immediately. It's treated as a pain medication if taken correctly. I think in some cases you got to take a little higher dosage than recommended, but most people tolerate it fine.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing minimization of pain, but then on a secondary, there's definitely a decrease in opioid use, a decrease in need for these other medications. And so that's what we're seeing as they go along and as they treat. As they get out of pain, as the inflammation goes down, we then treat them with some stretching, strengthening, because I also believe on the flip side of it, you've got to strengthen the body that when it's been injured, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you get the inflammation down, we strengthen the body, allow it to heal properly, and then we continue with a lower dosage of the CBD to maintain that decreased inflammation, decreased pain level, and then kind of that basic homeostasis that we're trying to achieve. And I've just had, like I said, remarkable results in my practice. I've been a chiropractor, like I said, about 20 years, and we get people's backs better and all that shit, which is awesome. But what's more important for me is, since I've started with the CBD over the last 6 months to a year, I have people truly contact me on the weekends at random times and write me and say, "You've changed my life. This has made a difference in my life. I can do things that I couldn't do before, and I continue to be more healthy and feel better than I have in years." And I'm hearing it on an endless level. And so that's what's really got my passion going, is the fact that in my practice, I started this with skepticism. I started this with I don't know. Like I said, I like to get high, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But the reality was, I saw immediately results with reduction of pain. People were in better moods. They have less anxiety, and they just feel better over a whole. A lot of times they can't really explain the feeling. It's definitely not a psychoactivity, but what it is is a real feeling of calm, a real feeling of decreased pain. And then from a strictly pain standpoint, I've had remarkable results myself, which has also been interesting because I don't particularly care for pain medications. I've had struggles with my own addiction and things like that of sorts, and have had these other struggles which have brought me to more natural things. And from a natural standpoint and pain standpoint, that's why I use the cannabis and the CBD. That's really why I have my medical cannabis card, mainly for pain. I'd had a hip dislocation and I've got a full hip replaced hip, and then have some other things, but mine was to decrease pain and decrease the use of opioids, and I found it very effective for me. And like I said, the patients have been gotten remarkable results with it.
That's interesting with your comment on opioids there, because that seems to be one of the most obvious impacts across the world. It seems that areas that previously had an extremely high level of opioid addiction and opioid use, when cannabis is implemented and becomes more readily accessible, opioid addiction immediately goes down, which obviously is a compliment to cannabis in itself.
Absolutely. And I think that in of itself is really one of the big reasons that I am so passionate about it, because being in a situation where I see people in pain all day long, all week long, and have for a long time, they get hooked on these medications. They get hooked on these opioids, and unfortunately, they really over the long haul cause some real detriment to the body. And seeing that over and over, and then like I said, I've struggled some personally with addiction and things. Mine was never particularly opioids, but in that setting, I've seen people's lives just destroyed, and have friends' lives just destroyed from opioids and things of that, which were just being given, left and right by your physicians and your insurance companies and things, which was just fine. And then the second you start talking about something natural like cannabis, everybody goes up in arms, and there's this, long-term stigma that you have to deal with to get anything done. And I think that that's so unfortunate, because if you talk to anyone, whether and you just look at them using cannabis versus using opioids, you can see that there is a benefit to use cannabis. So that's one of my main passions, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't actually think I've said this in the channel, but for about, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 years, I had I would probably say addiction to valium. So in Scotland, that's a real threat to I'd say people that are engaged in recreational substance use, that valium is so readily accessible. I was actually speaking to an individual the other day on the channel, and I was saying to him that you could access it's like 12 valium before a bottle of Iron Brew, which is Scotland's essentially national drink, and that's what it's kind of been like. And one of the things I noticed the most is that at the time when I think I was most engaged with valium use, and at the times when I couldn't get it, and cannabis would be the crutch. And over time, it got to the point where the sensation from cannabis consumption overpowered the need for valium. That was the reality. And valium is extremely dangerous. I mean, it's deadly. Let's be honest. And
Absolutely.
yet this is 100% accessible, and it's. I mean, benzodiazepines are overly prescribed, probably most likely the most overly prescribed medication, probably in the Western world anyway. So I think cannabis, again, when you mentioned that as well, that cannabis stigma is very often the first response from people who are unfamiliar with the plant. That's nothing more than the century of propaganda. That's what's happened here. We're unwinding the propaganda that's been nothing but misinformation and nothing but slanderous. I've referred to it often as the largest propaganda campaign that the human society has seen.
I agree 100%. And that's all that it has become, this huge propaganda machine. And it's just so unfortunate. And you mentioned Valium and the benzodiazepines, like you said, they can just get you down this vicious cycle to where you can't control your life. Yeah. Whereas you don't see that with cannabis. And like you mentioned it, you used it as a crutch. And in some ways people would think of that as bad, but like you said, it kind of overpowered. It became more beneficial and that than that heavy medication that you were using that was causing all these side effects. And I don't see other than the stigma itself, what the problem is, because we're all looking to feel better of sorts. And I think that the more naturally you can do so, the better off you're going to be from a health standpoint in general. But
perfectly said there, Jason, because even though obviously probably incorrect language using it as a crutch, because if you're to measure that, the notion of using it as a crutch, the physiological impact, if you're to have like this insane analytical basis when you're actually addressing what is going on in the body when somebody consumes cannabis, it's essentially natural processes. Yes, there's an element of supplementation because it's phytochemicals, but internally on a physiological level, it engages with anandamide, 2-arachidonoglycerol. The serotogenic system is complemented by cannabis supplementation essentially. So even though that, I think that's one of the stigmas that needs to be addressed over time, is that when individuals are using cannabis, there isn't really, it's synergistic to the human physiology.
Absolutely. And that's what I found so interesting. When I first kind of started doing research and stuff, I wasn't so sure on the whole endocannabinoid system and kind of the cascade of events and things, and the anandamide. That chemical is really interesting to me because I've been reading this book, this Runner's High. I don't know if you've been seeing my stuff. Need to check it out.
Yeah, well.
But it talks about basically how your body naturally has these chemicals on board, and it's part of this natural system, just like your cardiovascular system, just like your gut system and what have you. And so as you are inducing those things in, it does have this synergistic value. And my belief is kind of that, like any system, it can be diminished, and you can be, because of the stresses of today, a poor diet, no exercise, your fast foods, all those type of things cause stress to the system. And my belief is that it causes somewhat of a deficiency of these endocannabinoids. And as you can then naturally put them back in, you can kind of, like you said, synergistically boost that system, and then get, I think, that anandamide back on board, those natural chemicals firing right. And I think that that's really how the system is balanced. Like I said, a lot of it's hypothesized of sorts, but I really do believe that you're correct, that it is a real synergistic value, and that when you're using the cannabis, it's not like you're really putting anything new into the body. It's part of the system almost.
Yeah,
they say the molecular structure is very, very similar.
Yeah, I think that's what you said that perfectly there when you says it's a hypothesis element at the moment, and I think that's only because of the propaganda that's inhibited the ability for research. Because Ethan Russo, I think he's I'm probably going to do the man a disservice here, but he, I think, is the chairman of the International Cannabinoid Research in the Czech Republic, and he, I think it was the beginning of the 2000s, had articulated endocannabinoid system deficiency, which is essentially an umbrella term for I think it's if there's a collection of individuals who have irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, and also fibromyalgia, if they have one, tend to have one or the other. And he articulated that most likely this is a deficiency of the endocannabinoid system, because these are non-localized issues. And yet when you supplement with a cannabinoid-based products, these issues are either resolved or mediated to a point where it's no longer a negative impact on the person's life.
Yeah, I'd read that or had seen that actually. That was really interesting. And I agree. I think that's going to be the case. And I think that as the research comes along, that those things are going to hopefully become more prevalent and play out that way. And like I said, it will help break that stigma, so to speak, because as that research comes along and as you can show, hey, these things actually occur, I think it makes it much easier to get people on board, so to speak.
So, I've seen one of your videos on Facebook as well about relating to your CBD use and mental health. But just before we move forward, a little shout out to Jay Downey, who obviously introduced us. He's doing fantastic work at Mind Over Matter. Could you talk a bit about what you're going to be doing on the channel?
Yeah, absolutely. I shout out to Jay. I appreciate it. It's been great working with them. He's doing a lot of great work with mental health. My story with mental health is I've struggled with it for quite some time. And I've gone through and been diagnosed, several different diagnoses. I don't get personally caught up too much on them. But I've been diagnosed as obsessive compulsive, bipolar, and then I suffer some depression and things like that. But what I found is in my practice that like I said, the CBD really has a key in helping with anxiety, and I think some of the depressive type of activities and things. And so on the show, what I'm really primarily hoping to do is talk, number one, educate about CBD, really educate about our CBD, why I think it's a little better in some cases, and at least why I think it's important to know your CBD, where it comes from, that it comes from a good product, that it is extracted properly, and that it's got the type of testing and things. So on the show, I'm going to be talking a lot about those type of things with regards to CBD, how it's made, how it's processed, and then all the benefits. But at the same time, I'm going to also hopefully tell some stories about my mental health struggles and how it's CBD and THC have helped me kind of overcome those. My story is, like I said, I've been to rehab now. I've been twice. I've been now sober for 1 year and 9 months.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And what happened though was I was sober for about 1 year, and then I decided to go on this kind of health quest and that. And I was on all types of psychological medications, and I've been on Xanax, I've been on Valium, I've been on more that are the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, all those type of things. And the unfortunate thing was they helped me originally. They helped me kind of break the cycle, so to speak, which I'm not against, psychological medication. But what would always happen in my case was I would always end up getting to where I felt lethargic, got all these side effects, and then couldn't function on a daily basis. I've got to see patients on a daily basis, give them good advice, and be able to be present. Mm-hmm. And if I was on the psychological medications, I struggled. And or not so much struggled to stay sober or really even struggled with my mood. I was just very lethargic, didn't want to do anything, had very little ambition. And I couldn't do that with the type of job that I had. So over the last year, I really focused in on how I could do these things, had come along with the CBD. And so I got on a very specific regimen, have been able to get off all of the Xanax, all of the psychological medication from a personal standpoint. And so I feel better. I'm more functional than I've ever been. I'm more fit than I've ever been, which also plays a role with the mental health aspect. So I'm going to talk some on that. But I'm hoping to kind of tell my story about how, not that you necessarily have to get rid of all your medication, because that's not my bit. My bit is that you need to really look at your mental health, that it needs to be something that is talked about with people. And the quicker that you can get an understanding about it, the quicker that you can get something that works for you, and the more natural it is, the better. Whether it be CBD, whether it be CBD and exercise, or whether it be CBD, exercise, and food. Those are three main things with regards to diminishing anxiety and diminishing psychological problems that aren't given enough effort to. And if you really put the effort in with those things in a lot of cases and have a very good protocol, you can get rid of, or at least maintain those things. I don't think you get rid of psychological problems. I had somebody ask me, it was kind of funny. I had a patient ask me, because I do all these cannabis videos and this stuff. They said, why, if you have used cannabis for the last 20 years, why do you still have psychological problems? Why do you still have depression? Why do you still have anxiety? And I kind of thought to myself, well, that's kind of a silly question. Yeah. In that you don't ever get rid of anxiety. You don't ever get rid of depression. If you're a person that suffers those type of things, you will probably always be a person that has the tendency to go back to those type of things. It's always staying ahead of it, in my opinion, and looking for better ways to treat it. Yeah, sometimes I feel better than others. Other times I feel like shit. Yeah. But the reality of it going away isn't necessarily the case. What you want to do is get a good program that maintains your health, you're effective in society, and you feel good. And cannabis, CBD, exercise, and good food does that for me. And so that's kind of what I hope to also be talking about on the show. And that's what I've found, and I'm hoping that as I talk about that, it kind of decreases the stigma. Because that's what I've found around here as I've talked about my routine, as I've talked about my mental health, and I've talked about cannabis use, I found that more people come out and say, hey, it's okay to do. It's okay. And that's what I'm looking for from people. I've kind of gotten to the point where I don't really give a shit what people think of me personally.
Yeah.
I don't. And so that's given me this kind of ability to kind of say what I want, say what I feel, and kind of go on this tour of, hopefully educating people about the benefits of cannabis without worrying about my repercussions too much. Yeah. So.
No, I fully agree. And to be honest, I commend your openness towards it, because I'll be perfectly honest, I never really truly respected mental health until this year. We've had some unfortunate personal difficulties from the beginning of this year, and this year has shown me. Previously, I thought that anxiety was nervous, and I thought depression was sadness, and this is ridiculous. It's not even close. It's not the same animal.
No.
Depression will kill you. Sadness won't. Anxiety will paralyze you. Nerves won't, and that's the truth.
Right.
That's what it's been like. And I don't know if you've seen any of the artwork I produced, but I've done a cartoon that I'll send you over to see what you think. But what it is, essentially it's black and white. It's an individual staring into a mirror, and the mirror has four panels essentially, and it's four different faces of the person. So it's one head looking in. I'll put it on the screen now so the viewer can see, and what it will be, and it just stipulates what I was feeling at the time, because you're one person, but you can go through this roller coaster of emotion when your mental health isn't stable. And one of the things, when you mentioned it perfectly as well, about exercise is unbelievably important as a medicine for mental health, because I've noticed that if I don't exercise after day 3 or day 4, I feel incredibly low, and that's what I've noticed. It's after really about day 3, and I don't know if that's the neurochemicals beginning to settle, and then I'm, because obviously, as you know, when you exercise, you have this boost in serotonin, dopamine, and all these different positively enforcing chemicals, neurochemicals, and that's what I've noticed after about day 3. It's like a little alarm bell in my head, like, oh, you better get exercise, and even if the gym's not open, you're doing something in the house that day, but it's incredibly important. And I think mental health, in the past, I don't know if it's potentially a Scottish thing or something, but it's kind of been seen as a weakness. You don't talk about it, you just silence it down. But potentially, is that something you felt as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's unfortunate, and another unfortunate stigma of sorts, in that, the idea that, especially as males in a lot of cases, that if you talk about how you feel, or if you're not feeling good mentally, you're just weak. You're a weak mental person. Or you're a big puss, or you're whatever. And so you don't fit that machismo. But the problem with that is, what happens is, when you get into the cycle, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or whatever. The less you do about it, the more you'll feel about it, so to speak, or what have you. So I find that with mental health is, if you don't talk about it, and you find this with a lot of men. That's why a lot of these men are really loving. You probably have heard of Jordan Peterson.
Excellent. Yeah, good man.
It's why men really, I think, take to him, is he's come out and basically said, number one, we do struggle, that everyone struggles, that it's okay to struggle. But then on the flip side, what he does different is, I think, gives kind of this action plan. And I think men kind of like that, as, all right, well, I can do something about it, so to speak, at least. But no, I think that absolutely, there's definitely this stigma with mental health. And like you said, there's not sadness and emotions are one thing, but depression, anxiety, these actual disorders become debilitating for people. And until you've really suffered it, until you've really been in the mental struggle, so to speak, a lot of times you can't relate, I don't think. And I think that gives me some real fortunateness in that I've truly suffered since I was 6 years old. I mean, I've been to psychiatrists. I've had a genetic, we have a genetic predisposal. And it's been something that I've dealt with for a long time. And fortunately for me, I've kind of come out on the other end and at least know how to deal with it, know that it's just kind of part of my personality. And so I've been able to hopefully help educate some people in that, it is okay. And that it is something that everyone struggles, in my opinion. Now, the struggles are different for each individual, but you do struggle. And so getting a good plan, being open with people is usually the best way to settle that. So
No, I fully agree, and that's one of the things that I've really struggled with this year is even coming on the channel. Some of the times that when I've been at like the lowest, even sending out emails, and there's been times when I've sent out emails previous when I've been on kind of like a 2 or 3 days of like, yeah, I'm feeling good, this is okay, I'm building myself back up, and then I'll just hit rock bottom, and then I'll get an email back saying, okay, let's talk today, and I won't even have the strength to get on the camera to even talk to people or to have the information written down, and the entire thing would be, and I don't know, it's quite interesting, I should kind of look into it more, but the sensation I get is orientated in the center of my chest, and the only thing that I'm aware of is that you have this solar plexus region of nerve endings that's in the center of chest, and I find it intriguing to see what role that plays in the central nervous system, because that's where I feel it most, is that this heavy sensation in the center of my chest that kind of clouds my ability to even think and move forward, you know.
That's interesting. That is interesting. I don't know if there is this, the correlation, so to speak, but it is interesting. You notice you feel it in your chest, because I'd say that when people feel anxiety, or myself included, it is a lot of times in your chest. You get this almost overwhelming sensation, and then this inability to act in a lot of cases. And that's kind of what I struggle with. I'm one of these people who at one point, you can go along and be able to do anything. You can send out 9,000 emails, talk to anyone, talk left and right. But then the next day you wake up, and my gosh, the thought of talking to somebody, the thought of responding to an email, and the thought of anyone asking you a question, oh my gosh, and then you compound that by getting on a video. It's funny you mentioned videos, because that's how this all kind of started for me. Was I had, like I said, decided that I was going to get into the best shape as I possibly could. This started in this January 1st or 2nd. And so my rules were, I kind of changed it because I'd been struggling. And so I set up 3 main rules. One was to get up early by 4 a.m. And then the second was to work out between the 4 and 7 a.m. And then the third was just to eat for fuel. Right. Eat my food for fuel. But the whole intent was to get my head, into this better mental situation. And basically what's happened is, over the time, I've been able to now work out for 273 days in a row. Haven't missed a day. I've lost probably 30 or 40 pounds. Haven't looked at anything. And then have used the CBD to maintain and decrease my soreness. But what it's done for me is get me into the best mental state of my life. And I've been able to do things, but I started doing these videos, and I started probably around February. And when I first started, I could hardly get myself to even bring myself to go on the video. Yeah. I was talking to my secretary, and she said, yeah, I remember the first one you did. She said, here, I thought I was being motivational. I got on there and said some motivational statement or something. Yeah. He said, you look like you got on there and were dying after your exercise, and here I thought it was motivation. So I watch it back, So then the other part of the deal was I was going to do videos every day. I'll get to my point here. Every day, and make myself do a video just to get better at it was the whole goal.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's funny though, one day you're so excited to get on there and do your whole spiel, but the next day you wake up and who knows what the hell's changed chemically in your brain or whatever, to think to get on that thing or to talk in front of anybody it sounds about like you may as well get a gun or whatever. But no, it's funny. You mentioned the videos because it can be a real point of anxiety, and definitely feel that chest well up, so to speak.
Yeah, I 100% understand that sensation. It makes me laugh so much, because sometimes I've really felt like there's been some days, I'll be honest, I don't know if anybody noticed, but I actually about 4 months ago, like completely made the channel invisible to the public. so I've got like over 100 videos on the thing. I think I'm obviously 120 videos or so, and it got so low one time. Like I had 2 or 3 interviews, and it went fine and that, and then it was like 2 or 3 days later, and I hit a rock bottom, and I was like, there wasn't enough. I put so much effort into editing them, and nobody really watched them. And I was like, fuck this. So I was like, eventually just ended up turning it off, man. And I sat there on the couch, and I was like, fucking wasting my time. What am I doing to myself, man? And in my mind, you're trying to build towards something in the future, so inevitably you're not going to see a turnover immediately, but your emotional state doesn't tell you that. Your emotional state says, I need immediate return, and why is it not working? And then you're a loser, you're not doing well, and all of these compounding factors. And sometimes the thing that I'll actually point out is the thing that keeps me going is my son. So he said to me one day, my son, he's 7 years old, and he said to me, he went, Daddy, do you, and this is what's ringing in my ears since then, he was like, Daddy, do you watch your own videos? And I said to him, I was sitting there when I'm on my knee and we're watching TV, and I was like, nah, I only watch good stuff, little man. And he went, I think your stuff's good. And that's what's stuck in my head. I was like, it doesn't matter if anybody likes it. It doesn't matter if you even like it. He likes it, man. And that's the main thing. He's the motivation for this. And it's really like, there was like somebody put a picture up on Instagram, and it was like a cartoon, which obviously I really respond to. And there was a woman essentially in the shower. I was just obviously drawn. It was a really intimate picture, and it was a woman, and her child was washing her. And the thing at the top says, there's so many children out there that don't know that they've saved their parents' life. And I was like, that just rings true so much, because that is the case. If it wasn't for the little man, I would be struggling to find meaning behind a lot of this stuff. And, you know, he's a stabling element in my mental health when it comes to these things, because inevitably you have a responsibility to be the best parent you can be, and you show them the way and you guide them. But it's heavy, and it's difficult, and it makes you, if you hit a low, that sometimes could be a compounding factor, that you feel that you're not good enough for them, and you should be pulling yourself up. And it's a continuous struggle that it feels perpetual sometimes.
Absolutely. No, I have two daughters myself. I've got two kids, one that's 10, and then I've got a 2.5-year-old, and they are my big reason, and in a lot of cases, my big motivator. That's one of the big things that happened with me is I had kind of gone on this Facebook tour of telling my story of sorts. And my daughter was kind of my final reason of, you know, I'd struggled through rehab, and my daughter, my 2-year-old, was at the time only 3 weeks old when I'd gone in. So I was at a very, very low point. But just having those two daughters there, and knowing that they still support you, and that they still love you, and they, you know, that you have to be there for them, you know, was enough some days to just keep you going. And sometimes when you're dealing with the mental health type of things, and or just dealing with life in general, you've got to have those things. And kids are awesome to have to be able to feed off of, and really get that, you know, like you said, it doesn't matter one bit, or it doesn't fucking matter who watches your shit. If your kid likes it, that gives you that feeling like, all right,
that's what it's like.
Power on. What the hell? You know?
He does. He absolutely loves it. And the thing is, I don't know if you've seen, but I've got a CANNAMAN comic series, and so I've got all these CANNAMAN stuff. Have you seen them?
I did. I've just barely got to start looking at them, but I really like how they're done. They're really cool.
Good, man. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No,
the reason I say this is
I'm going to start sharing your stuff too. I like a lot of it.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I've actually got a few books here. And what, if you don't mind, if you send me over your address, I'll send you one over, because essentially it's like all the collection. There's two of them. There's one up there called The First 33, and there's another one over here, which is called The Original Collection. And both of them are kind of separate. So that one there is about 145 pages, and that has the 8-page comics. And I was drawing these before fully doing the interviews. So and the reason why this is all forethought. So essentially establishing the brand was inevitably exactly that. So I wanted to do something extraordinary for my son, and in order to do that, you really have to put a lot of work in. And I do believe that there is a ratio of the amount of work that you put in is proportionate to the amount of success you'll receive at the end. And I do believe that. And so what I did was I was like, well, I'm going to just exert every part of my being towards this thing. So I spent the past 2.5 years just creating this character, creating this foundation. And my son, he's my number one fan. And to the point where he knows the characters. I mean, I've read them to him. They're swearing all the way through it. And I'm reading them to him nighttime. And one of the stories, actually, I'll have to put it up on the screen so they can see. But one of them is Donnie. So Donnie's the rabbit. And he's, interestingly, CANNAMAN and Donnie are actually, I would say, symbolic representations of parts of my psyche. And I didn't know this at the time. So as I was drawing them at the time, I was just engaged in trying to sit and think about what I was going to do with the characters. And it wasn't until looking back over them, I was like, wait a minute. Like, CANNAMAN essentially, he's a conscientious, he thinks straight, he's wise, he tries to do his thing. So that's essentially a representation of my super ego and the ego, which is the mediating factor of the mechanics to move forward. And then Donnie is this vulgar, desire-based,
asshole. And I was like, that's my id. That's what that is. So I'm using these things to channel out parts of my psyche. And my son, I was reading them to him one night in one of the books. And it was interestingly, I did the story and I forgot that I was going to be reading it to him. So one of the things has got Donny, it's called the comic called Day of Donnies. And what it is, he goes into a cloning machine and then there's tons of him. And then all it is him coming out going, fuck this, fuck this, fuck this, fuck this. Like that, right? And that's what it is. So then I'm sitting there reading this to my son and I forgot that I put that in it. So I'm reading over it and I got to that point. I was like, oh no. And he looked at it because he's old enough to read what the word is. And he went, and he all he kept saying was like, say it, daddy, say the swearies, daddy. And he just kept over and over. So I'm sitting there like, fuck this, fuck this, fuck this.
Yeah.
And he's just cracking up. And it's funny because I'm then going to, I'm working on the animation. So I'm going to make a kind of an animation. And I was telling my son,
awesome.
I was telling my son this other day. It was like last week or the week before. And I was like, I'll be a good little man because when it gets to all, it'll be a big deal and there'll be staff and stuff like that. I was like, you'll be the chief of staff and you'll be help them. And he was like, yeah, daddy, but don't worry. I know. He says, I know what we'll do. If anybody's like, Donny's a nice guy, he says, no, he's not. Donny does lots of swearies. That's brilliant. I was like, he knows the characters, so they are.
Absolutely.
They really are the reason for being, But yeah, I'm sure the viewers will be sick of me talking about this.
Oh, no. That's awesome.
But yeah, if what I just talked, you mentioned earlier about CBD and CBG. Then, I mean, what is the difference for anybody that's unaware of the difference between these two molecules?
So CBD and CBG are both cannabinoids. There are about 120 in the cannabis plant, and CBD is commonly known as cannabidiol. It is probably more researched and more commonly known. It is found to help decrease inflammation, decrease pain, and then been found as a sedative. Now, the big difference between the CBG being another cannabinoid, it's called cannabigerol. Basically, what they stated is it's kind of like the mother of all cannabis cannabinoids, in that it starts early on in the planet in the cannabis plant as what is it? It's CBGA, the acid form, and then as the cannabis plants grow, it changes into the THCA, the CBDA, and then the CBG. The thing is, it's fairly rare in most of the cannabis plants, so there's very small amounts of it. What they found with CBG is that it seems to affect similar receptor sites in the ECS, but it seems to affect them slightly different, in that one seems to be an agonist and one seems to be an antagonist. So basically, the CBD is the agonist and it activates the receptor sites, whereas your CBG in the endocannabinoid system seems to be, like I said, the antagonist, which blocks the receptor sites. They also seem to cause a little bit different way of decreasing inflammation, but both seem to have the ability to decrease inflammation. They also find that the CBG in and of itself is really good for females. They're finding it really good potentially for cancer and also for infections like MRSA and things of that nature. So they kind of treat different things. But they also work both on the endocannabinoid system, and they're finding, as the research goes, that they seem to work with the receptor sites slightly differently. But they're both cannabinoids, and they're both being found to have medical benefit. CBD CBG combo that we use in our practice, it's a 2-to-1 product, and I've had great luck with reducing pain. And I've also had great luck with reducing pain, like from menstrual cycle pain and things like that. I've had multiple patients that have had no success with anything else. They've taken their Advil, they've taken their Tylenol, and still getting severe cramping, and took the CBD CBG combination. And within 20 to 30 minutes, they said that the muscles had relaxed, that the abdominal pain had gone away, and had done much better. So for that kind of thing, we're having success. It is isolated, so it doesn't have any of the THC in it, whereas like our full spectrum product in our oils will have the CBD and the THC product in it. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
That's nice. I mean, I did actually see that on your website, and it looks like a really impressive product. And interestingly, that you say that it was so fast acting. Is that this is one of the things I noticed personally when I've been taking CBD is that I had tendonitis in my forearm through drawing. Funnily enough, actually, I said that to a friend the other day about the seat. My forearm was like, "Yeah, I wasn't drawing you, fucking." I was like, "No, I was drawing. That's what."
That's right.
I was like, but I had tendonitis for a month. It was right, and I was taking anything. I was obviously because I was smoking anyway, so I didn't really think about that as a therapeutic influence. But I was smoking, and I just obviously still I was taking I was rubbing ibuprofen cream on it, and I mean my arm was glowing in the fucking dark, and it was like honestly just seeing the state of this thing. And then but eventually the very first time I got really introduced to a CBD product, I got given it, and I took that, and within about 25 minutes, maybe 45 minutes at the very most, immediately I didn't feel a tension in my forearm, and after about 3 or 4 days, it was because my arm was actually properly swollen up. After about 3 or 4 days, the swelling went down, and I was like, this is instantaneous. And one of the things that I say to people when they're talking about CBD, when they're like, and they're taking it, they're like, what does it feel like? I was like, the way you'll know CBD is working is that the thing that was bothering you, you forget it was bothering you. And then you go, oh, wait a minute, that was bothering me and now it's not. And that's how you identify it, really.
Absolutely. That's crazy you say that. That was kind of my similar type of experience with CBD. As a smoker and a THC guy, I had these tendinitises. I had actually had a full hip replacement a few years ago. I'd had some sports injuries and things. So I get my hip irritated. And when I first started using the CBD, we've got a really good topical product. And I wasn't so sure on it. I used BioFreeze and things, but I wasn't a big fan. And I had this little tendinitis in my hip, and I had been in the car, so I rubbed a little of the CBD on, and I took a little orally as well. And like you said, within probably 10 to 15 minutes, it wasn't a sensation of, it was more the, oh my gosh, where did the pain go?
Yeah.
And you'd kind of forgotten about it. And I thought, well, is this a fluke? Because I thought, maybe my hip had kind of gone away. But I consistently had this problem occur. And it's the one and only thing that will, within 10 minutes, it's gone. Now, it will come back sometimes, but on a whole, it significantly decreases inflammation. And that's what I found so interesting in my practice, the quickness, that it actually does work like a pain medication, that you don't necessarily have to build it up into the system to get the results. If you take the proper amount and that type of thing, and at least stay consistent for a day or two, you get pretty quick results.
I've seen in one of your videos you'd mentioned that CBD, taking cannabinoids with fats, is more beneficial. And interestingly, I've actually found the same thing. Is that when I'd been making my own cannabis caps, essentially, interestingly, it was essentially a fluke that I stumbled across it. So the carrier oil that I was using was, I think it was like olive oil or something like that. So I was just obviously just using the material, trim material predominantly, and just using it and cooking it in the olive oil for 12 to 24 hours, sometimes 36 hours if I'd forgotten it was on. And then I went back to it and I was like, oh, that's fine, and I'll use this kind of thing. And I didn't have any olive oil one time, and so I just used coconut oil, and the product was substantially better off. It was way better. It was far more potent. And I was wondering, I was like, I've used the same ratio of material. What's the thing that's different here? And it must have been the fat-based content in the coconut oil.
Yeah, all the research says that because of the molecular structure, that the absorption rate is so much better with the fats. And so I started recommending people either take a fatty acid or eat a fatty meal when they're taking it, from an absorption standpoint, just to kind of cover all bases. And then with regards to our oil itself, like you said, it's made with the MCT oil, and that type of thing, which helps that absorption as well. So yeah, that's what I've seen in the practice. We've had, what I found interesting was I was also having some people that I'd forget to tell that to, or they wouldn't get that, and weren't getting quite the benefits, or didn't feel they were taking enough, and just added that component to it, and seemed to really get a little more absorption. And like you said, the strength seemed to be greater.
Yeah, it's really exciting, all this. It really is. I mean, I'm sure, you're going to have to get going soon, Jason, yeah?
Yeah, what time is it?
It's about, well, I've got 10 to 8 here, so what's that, 10 to 2 where you are?
Yeah, probably so.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably need to get off here shortly.
No worries at all then. Well, just to wrap it up then, so what is it you're hoping to achieve in the near future? Is it just removing more of the stigma and promoting the dox oils and obviously the efficiency that they're achieving?
Yeah, my goal is, like I said, to improve the stigma towards cannabis in general, to educate the masses on the benefits of CBD, THC, and all the cannabinoids. And then I really hope to, with Doc's Oils, provide a high quality CBD oil at an affordable price for people, because I think that that's one of the problems also, is that the cost of the product becomes prohibitive for the medicine. And I think that because we are kind of farm to table, we don't send any of our stuff out, any of our CBD out. What happens is we're able to keep that cost down. We're able to control the quality, and we're able to give you a consistent product. So that's what I think is really important, is getting the message out there, getting quality product to people, and really giving and promoting it as medicine. And so that's my goal. And I hope that Doc's Oils continues to grow, and that we can continue to help people. And I appreciate people like yourselves that are out there, talking about cannabis and looking at it as medicine, and also being honest with the fact that you use it recreationally, or you use it, in general, and that you found benefit that way. I think people get so caught up in the stigma of usage in general, and forget that being happy, as long as you're not losing presence, and as long as you're not causing problems for other people, I don't see the problem. So I'm hoping that, like I said, regulation decreases, and we get more and more research as we go along.
Thanks to Dr. Talley for giving me his time, and thanks to you for sticking around until the end of the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the content. I'll see you next time.